It's the Dark Souls of Nerbit challenge runs. Nah, but really, I've been wanting to do a Dark Souls video for a while. If for nothing else, it gives me an excuse to play the game. Weapon-based challenges are kind of the basis of a lot of runs, just look at my plethora of Fallout videos for reference. Dark Souls has a lot of unique, interesting, and all-around cool-looking weapons, which we will be using none of, as today I channel my inner caveman to find out, can you beat Dark Souls with the club? Now, I could have named the video with a club, but then that would technically open me up to using the Great Club, which is the Bonk champion this side of Lordran. No, rather today I wanted to focus on the basic club that you can start the game with, so long as you choose the best starting class in history. The club hits pretty hard for an early game weapon, and it has an A scaling with the strength stat, so my path has been set out before me already, as I will want to focus mainly on strength for maximum damage. I'm not expecting this to be incredibly difficult. This is more so me just dipping my toes into the pools of Souls content. If you would like to see other, much crazier people than I, then I would highly recommend channels like Yamfa, Lil Aggie, and The Backlogs. They have cracked these games open and beaten them in some incredibly insane ways that deserve to be seen by everyone. Also, one final note before we get started, there is a link in the description to a video on my second channel, which is a compilation of sorts of all the unedited boss fights from this run, just in case some people are interested in seeing that. Now, with all that out of the way, let's begin. Character creation's up first, and of course it's a deprived class, no armor can be an issue, but it's the only way to start off with the club, so we take what we can get. I take the Master Key as my gift as well, as why wouldn't you, it's literally the best one, and then I just mash buttons until I get an abomination that I'm happy with. Waking up in the Asylum, which is fair, I would probably have drowned this creature, but isolation works fine too. Nothing attacks you up until you run into your first boss, who is one short ladder climb away from your cell. As of right now, we have no weapons, so fighting is not an option. Well, it is in a normal playthrough if you want to get the Great Hammer, but you know what I mean. We grab a few planks hastily glued together and pretend it's a shield, just long enough to grab our club, which is conveniently just lying in the middle of this corridor. As you might expect, the planks in my left hand don't make that good of a shield, so I mainly just choose to two-hand my club whenever possible. Two-handing a weapon makes it slower, naturally, but it also inflicts 50% more damage as opposed to when it is one-handed. So in a situation like this, it's usually best to take the trade-off. Honestly, I thought the slow speed of the club swing was going to be the main issue, but really it's the fact that it has no real fluid combo strings. It's pretty much only the one wind up and smack, which works. I mean, just look at how fast it messes up the Asylum Demon after I Mario jump onto its head. With the tutorial beaten, I choose to become a bird and be taken away to Firelink Shrine. With the Master Key in hand, I actually have a few options of where to head now. But to be a little boring and vanilla, I just head on up the intended path to the Undead Burg. The Hollow soldiers can mostly succumb to death with one well-placed two-handed club bash, so no problems here. For what it's worth, I do try to take out at least every enemy once. Figured it makes it more interesting than most of the footage just being me hightailing it to the next Silent Hill looking wall. Plus through random drops it will actually give me the opportunity to get some armor. The breeze between my knees was getting old, not that this crotch bush is much better, but it gets the job done for now. I also grabbed the other wooden shield. Someone actually took the time to construct this one properly, so I don't get splinters every time I block a shot. There's a merchant nearby, which I could trade the life force of my enemies for some clothes, but none of it is aesthetically pleasing to me, so I just murder him and take his keys, along with his weeb sword. I spent a little time here running around and getting some of the random items that were around the area, and even managed to get my first stupid Dark Souls death as I decided to use my jumping attack on a Hollow while he was practicing being a meat grinder. Next go, and I just bust his brains against the nearby wall, followed by his close friends. There's also a Black Knight here who proves much more of a challenge. He certainly hits a lot harder than the Hollows, that's for sure. He can prove difficult if you're new, but once you realise they have a weakness to circling their shield arm and fishing for backstabs, they fall like anything else. If I was more competent, I could just parry him to death, but despite being someone who gets a massive kick out of parrying in games like Bloodborne and Sekiro, I rarely use the mechanic in Dark Souls outside of two scenarios, both of which you will see in this run, so yay for that. The Knight also dropped a chunk, which will come in very handy later when we get to really upgrading our weapon. We bring back the Mario briefly to avoid some flaming barrels, get some more chunks thanks to good luck, and then it's on to boss number 2. You can already tell he's going to be a pushover by the fact that he shares the boss music with the Asylum Demon. And just like Mr. Tutorial, we can suck away half of the bull's health by diving on his head as well. Granted, I also used some pine resin to electrify my club for a little extra oomph. Really didn't need to, mind you, it was kind of overkill. Fun though. Afterwards, we meet my man crush, agree to take his soap and spread it throughout the kingdom. I then immediately get roasted by a dragon because I didn't run fast enough. Fortunately, he isn't spitting the hot fire just yet, as this does barely any damage, allowing me to run down the stairs and set up a ladder shortcut to our old bonfire. Now, we could run underneath the bridge to safely emerge on the other side, but I want that bonfire under the Drake. Attempting to fight him right now, while possible, would probably just result in my death, so I just wait for him to land on the bridge and then run right past him while he's distracted. After doing so, I rest at the bonfire and then he flies away. I figure getting as many chunks now will cut down on potential grinding later, so I head on up to the nearby tower to lead another Black Knight to his inevitable doom. I could fight him up there, it's true, but I know for a fact I would accidentally roll down the stairs like an idiot and get killed for it, so I wish to save myself at least a little bit of embarrassment today. Just like his friend before him, backstab fishing is indeed his weakness, and works like a charm, getting me one more chunky boy. Speaking of chunks, there's a boar in the very next area. The plan was to leave him for now, so I could just run this route up and over the top of this, and then dive in past the hollow before they can close the gate. This way I don't have to go the slightly longer route through the underground area with the Pinkman. Well, I get through, watch the soldier close the gate, and then after a battle with 3 of them that really shouldn't have been as difficult as it was, I managed to take them out and then open the gate for future use. For some reason I was under the impression the boar would not run past the gate, but that was in fact not true, and now I had to deal with him whether I wanted to or not. It's alright, simply sprinting past him up to a higher part of the structure would be easy enough to do, allowing me to take out the archer and having the boar burn itself to death in a nearby fire. I could have done another plunge attack like the last 2 bosses, but this way is a lot more interesting. I take a moment to go around the nearby church and take out all of the enemies, mainly the Boulder Knights, in the hopes that one of them would drop some normal Titanite shards, but sadly that was not the case. I could grind for them, that is an option, yes, or I could spend my time wisely and just purchase the last ones I need from Andre the Blacksmith. With enough materials in hand, I increase my club to its current maximum potential, that being +5, and get to work putting it to use. I am more than a match for the next major boss, that being the Gargoyles, but you see, when I play Dark Souls, I try to do as much as I physically can before taking out most of the bosses. What that entails for now is me beating up the nearby Titanite demon, followed by schooling another Black Knight, as well as grabbing the Grass Crest Shield. I'm not exactly planning to block a lot, I'll either just tank it or roll through it. So the Grass Crest Shield is really the best choice for me, as even if it's on my back while I'm two-handing with the club, I still get its passive buff, which increases my stamina regen. The increased stamina regen comes into play right away as I take on the next optional boss, that being the Moonlight Butterfly. Probably the worst boss in the game if you decided that you have some sort of vendetta against using ranged weapons, as it spends most of the fight trying its best to annoy melee-focused builds. I have 10 Estus flasks at the ready, so I have plenty of healing to go around. It's really just a matter of dodging back and forward until it decides to land on the grassy parts of the bridge to have a snack. This then puts it in battering range, and we take full advantage of that. I can lower its health to a quarter, but don't output enough damage to get him in the 1 cycle. Not that it matters, I just go back to limp biscuiting my way around the bridge until it's time to land the last few strikes and win the fight. That's about all I wanted to do in the forest for now, so I double back to the church, slay the demoted Demon Souls boss that's now a standard enemy, and make my way to the Gargoyles. Except wait, let's not pretend like I'm going to forget about Lautrec. This is a Dark Souls 1 playthrough after all. Everyone knows you do not play Dark Souls 1 and not murder the hell out of Lautrec for his jewellery. Sure, the ring will break if I take it off, but it also increases my equip load, health, and stamina, so why would I ever want to do that in the first place? With that, I'm about as overprepared as possible to fight the Gargoyles. Well, actually, it's possible to get a +15 weapon before them, but that's besides the point. Anyway, I accidentally, unintentionally, perfected the fight. Sure, I nearly walked right off the roof near the beginning, but I didn't, and therefore I would call that pretty flawless. The next boss, on the other hand... Pain! I am kidding. Mostly. He messed me up on my first attempt, mainly my fault. I normally lure the dogs up to this part of the stairs like everybody else, but in the ensuing chaos, smashed my club into the wall, and then fell down and got promptly bullied for it. Second attempt, I just took things a lot slower and made sure to hold my ground when I was at the top of the stairs. Eventually, this caused the dogs to fall down below with the Capra Demon, and allowing me to take out both the dogs and damage the boss with a well-placed plunge. From there followed a few more stupid blunders due to mistimed rolls, but fortunately not enough failure to kick me back to the bonfire, and thankfully I was able to come out on top this time. Due to having the Master Key, the depths are entirely optional as I don't need to kill the dragon for the key to Blighttown. That said, I am planning to kill all the bosses, so I may as well. Plus I wanted to take out the butcher and her dog so I could safely grab the large ember in the nearby chest. Once I take this back to the blacksmith, I'll have access to +10 weapons, assuming I can find enough pieces of large titanite. Before dealing with all of that, there's still the matter of the Gaping Dragon, and before that still is King Rat. He may be the giant rat that makes all of the rules, but not one of them was making sure he was well protected from the overly aggressive Fred Flintstone wannabe with the Yabba Dabba Donk. Because I am not an idiot, most of the time, I made sure to deal with the rat children and their babysitter, as he could potentially buff the dragon during the coming fight and make things just a little bit more difficult. Honestly, I probably should have let him, seeing how the gaping dragon is the poster boy for incredible design but underwhelming boss. He can do a lot of damage, sure, but he is also relatively slow and has a habit of just hanging around after most of his attacks, like he is awaiting someone's approval before going again. It is fun to cut off his tail though, as it hinders him further, plus it looks quite funny when he attempts to whack you with his stump. The one thing he definitely has going for him, compared to the other bosses we've already killed anyway, is he has a lot more health and better defenses. This is probably because you can actually do some bonus damage to him if you manage to hit his tiny adorable little head that sits above the terrifying ribcage monster. This is possible with a melee build, as he will occasionally slam said ribcage into the ground as he gets ready to charge. When this happens, it's pretty easy to walk up and get a few swings into his head before needing to back off, assuming you don't wish to be pancaked. A couple of minutes of booping his snoot and clapping his ass, and the fight is won, and we are moving on before I even question why I wrote that sentence like that. On the way out, I had another run-in with the butcher. It's not the same one, there are two of them down here. I was lucky enough that this one dropped the sack headpiece for me to wear though. It's not a good piece of protection by any means, but I think it goes well with our current look, so it stays for now. Thanks to one of many shortcuts, we circle back to Firelink and can now begin heading down to the city, formerly known as Lagtown. I had to make most of the journey twice, as I was bested on my first attempt due to a mix of bad toxic damage and these little fire dogs who I always underestimate, as I've never understood why they hit as hard as they do. Turns out the toxic spitters don't respawn, so I was able to carefully position myself to lure the dogs out to me one at a time and then take them out so I could grab the Firekeeper's soul that they're guarding. For the handful of you who have never played the game, this is an item that will either give me 5 humanity, which can do many things, or upgrade the healing factor of my Estus flasks. The latter being the substantially better choice. Once I make it to the swamp floor, I want to die, but that's an inevitability in this game, so for now I just start collecting all the large titanite that I can find. For good measure, I even go over and take out all the leeches in this corner of the map, as they have a chance to drop some. In short, I was able to get a total of 6 pieces. It's not enough to get my club to plus 10, but we can change that in a bit, as Sense Fortress is coming up soon, and there will be more than enough materials there. On my way to Quelaag, I of course run into Maneater Mildred. There can be only one sack-wearing psychopath in these sewers, and it sure as hell won't be her. Onto the spider now, and it's most people's favourite boss, and I'm sure you can hazard 2 guesses as to why. Probably the first properly tough fight you will come across, if I'm being honest. Like every boss, once you've memorised her patterns, she's easy enough to beat. All you have to do is watch out for her AoE move, which is highly telegraphed by her human body, lying down like so. The fight was going well, I was playing very cautiously and only throwing out attacks when I knew they would land. It felt like it was going to be a very clean victory. That was until she set up a rather sneaky combo by firing her lava spit right behind me and then following it up with her explosion, meaning when I tried to move backwards, I was stuck between a rock and a hard place, so to speak. Even if I hadn't stepped in the fire, the AoE probably would have one-shot me anyway. No matter, on attempt number 2, I just make use of the rather large arena to lure her to areas that aren't covered in her vomit, so that I can attack her safely without the worry of getting trapped again. Sure enough, this works, and after a few clubs to her sides, she goes down, and I can ring the second bell and open up the next area of the main quest. However, before doing that, I head deeper into the earth, re-emerge in hell, and go to take out Ceaseless Discharge. He's kind of a gimmick boss. Sure, you can goad him into fighting you if you have a ranged weapon to have a somewhat normal fight. Or you can run past the demon, steal his sister's clothes, which will naturally piss him off, at which point you can lead him back to the fog gate, causing him to jump over and hang onto the ledge, and allowing you to casually push him off for perhaps the easiest boss in the series. This removes the lava down below, allowing access to a portion of the demon ruins, but we can't do much here until later, so for now it's time for the long walk back up through Blighttown to Firelink Shrine, where after getting a brief glimpse of my sleep paralysis demon, we return to Andre and manage to get our club to plus 9. Sense Fortress awaits, but with a plus 9 weapon I can reliably tackle a bunch of other areas right now, so let's go do that. First of all, I do some parkour to make it back to the Asylum. The demon from before may be gone, but underneath his arena lies a carbon copy of him called the Stray Demon. The major difference is the Stray Demon, as you might expect, does more damage, has more health, and as an added bonus, a bunch of his attacks now have an AoE blast, rather similar to Quelaag. Everyone had that one boss when they first play a Souls game that gave them the absolute worst time imaginable. Well, back during my first playthrough in 2013, that was the Stray Demon for me for some reason. For the life of me, I could just never manage to avoid the area of effect attacks. Granted, it has been a decade now since my first run through of Dark Souls, so I have learned how to deal with him and quickly get out of the way when he's winding up one of his kill moves. One thing I didn't know about was that apparently you can cheese him into doing the same butt slam attack over and over again by doing a jump attack followed by a regular swing once he lands. I just did this because the jumping attack is the standard heavy swing with a club, and I figured it would be the fastest way to rack up the damage. I had absolutely no idea that it would entirely break his AI. I've never really watched 100% Dark Souls speedruns where they come and fight the Stray Demon. Is this a commonly used tactic? Seriously, if anybody knows, leave a comment, I am genuinely curious. Anywho, a few more layers of cheese and the Stray Demon is no more, and best of all, his demise brings with it a Titanite slab. This is the final material you need to get a weapon from plus 14 to plus 15, or in other words, complete a weapon's upgrade path, so it will be handy to have. The two other items I'm here for is the Peculiar Doll in my old cell, as it allows me to fight another boss later, and the Rusted Iron Ring, which allows us to walk normally in uneven terrain such as high water and swamps. In fact, we used the ring right away to make the fight with the Hydra a lot easier. Not much to say about the Hydra, just find a safe spot to put up your shield, wait for it to attack, and then batter in its multiple heads until either you deplete its health bar or take out all of the heads. With that out of the way, we can recreate the best scene from MGS3 and head into a deeper section of the forest that leads into another mandatory boss fight. Granted, it's one we don't have to actually fight until much later, but with my weapon as good as it is, I figured we could go down the path of fighting the bosses as if I was planning to join the Dark Wraiths. There is a faster and safer way to reach Seath by just paying the blacksmith 20,000 souls for the crest of Artorias, which opens a door back at the beginning of the forest, but you see, I am a cheapskate, and those souls are mine. Seath's a cool, ridiculous boss. It's a shame that she spends most of the fight hopping away from you, or at least that's what happened in my case. I don't have a lot of armor equipped, still wanting to keep my equip load low enough for fast rolling at least for now. So if she lands a good few hits on me, she will take me down rather quick. Fortunately, she falls victim to the oh so reliable strategy of just planting yourself firmly underneath the boss and hacking away at them whenever they're standing still. Sure, she will jump away, but then I just wait for an opening and rinse and repeat. Seath has one final trick up her sleeve, to be fair, and it is to make you feel like a bad person, as once her health is low enough, she begins limping around the arena and reminds you that you're beating up a dog. Nothing can be done about this, so we have to finish her off and live with our guilty conscience. For all of 2 minutes before we get the Covenant of Artorias and the Hornet Ring, two rings that will be very handy for different reasons. Before using the Covenant Ring, I head off to Sen's Fortress to quickly blitz past all of it. Once you've done this enough times, you know how to essentially speedrun it. Beat up the snakes, use your remaining brain cells to avoid the easy to dodge blades, have a snake destroy a wall to free a sorcerer you won't use, and then jump across this gap to find not only a key for a shortcut to skip the death traps on a return visit, but a merchant who will sell you large titanite if you didn't manage to find enough allowing you to get your weapon to plus 10. Alright, so our damage is far above what we probably should have for this section, but to make sure our defenses don't let us down, I return to the forest once again to grab the stone armor set and truly complete our combat flintstone persona. With this armor and the plus 10 club combined, I am ready to descend into New Londo. The ghosts are easy one-shots and don't do a ton of damage. The only real issue is when they gang up on you, but that's what the stone set is for. Not only does it provide a much welcome defense bonus, but it increases my poison enough so that I'm rarely staggered even when being attacked by multiple enemies. Two heavy attacks take out the red Manus, allowing me to steal his keys and steal the town's water supply right from underneath their noses. I am now allowed to run around the soggy corpse floor of New Londo, which brings with it its own challenges, mainly the Dark Wraiths. I've always thought of the Dark Wraiths like faster Black Knights, by which I mean the same tactic of circling them and fishing for backstabs works like a charm. Killing them is also advised as they will occasionally drop the last few chunks that I need, as luck was on my side today with the Black Knight and Crystal Lizard drops. The Dark Wraiths still shouldn't be taken lightly however. While coming here is now an option, and to an extent advised, the Dark Wraiths are still some of the hardest hitting normal enemies, and as such, attempting to fight two of them at once, even in my stone suit, proves to be a little bit too much. If I had a faster weapon, this probably wouldn't be an issue, but the long wind up of the club, coupled with its short range, presents problems when attempting to engage multiple foes at the same time. It's okay, as on the next try, things go much worse. On the third try, it finally goes my way as I very carefully fight them one at a time, like I should have from the beginning. Better yet, just down here is where we can find the very large ember, allowing us access to plus 15 weapons. Something that we really don't need until the last stretch of the game, but to hell with it, I see no reason in purposely not using it after I deal with the four kings. Speaking of, they are the next boss, and the real reason why I got the stone set. Dodging the four kings attacks, while viable, it honestly just serves to waste valuable slashing time. and time is the one thing you don't want to waste during the fight, as after a set amount of time passes, more kings start to spawn, and I don't need to repeat myself about why fighting multiple enemies is bad, let alone multiple bosses. The stone set allows me to poise right through everything they throw at me without a care. Considering I have to wear the Covenant of Artorias to survive down here, I don't have the ability to fast roll my armor, so rolling wouldn't be advised at all. All I need to do is lay on the pain as fast as possible and heal whenever I see an opening. I end up cutting it very close as I'm only down to my last couple of Estus flasks whenever I manage to land the killing blow. Obviously, to really secure the victory, I could have just got the Rite of Kindling and came in here with 20 Estus flasks, but that always feels like a bit too much, you know? I say that feels like a lot, but yet here I am getting my plus 15 weapon and immediately using it on one of the easiest bosses of the run. The Golem can normally be a tanky boy, that is assuming you don't overcompensate like we are. Due to the damage output, I'm able to stun him incredibly fast, which from there, only a few more swings causes him to fall over, and due to being on the bridge, he tumbles right off the side and plummets to his doom like a Looney Tunes skit. Fun fact, this is the only time I've actually made him fall off the side. I've watched it be done many times, but never actually done it myself. So that's fun. The boiled flesh monsters carry me over the nearby wall, we get the E3 trailer shot, and now it's time to explore the city. Probably comes as no surprise, but seeing how we now have a max upgraded weapon and some great armor to boot, the pace of the run is about to pick up immensely. The gargoyles, having not learned their lesson the first time, attempt to upstage me yet again, and you can imagine how that panned out. The real scary part of the city is the fact that we are forced to tightrope walk across the rafters while overly aggressive art connoisseurs throw knives at me. They aren't difficult to deal with by any means, but the fear of gravity is always present. Making it past them, we can crank the lift down 2 notches to see exactly what they're protecting. The answer? Their bootleg copy of Mario 64. The Painted World is a short and sweet little jaunt that gives everyone tumors and brings back another boss from Demon Souls to an extent. None of that matters as I'm here to murder this already half-dead dragon. Like a surprising number of creatures in the Soul series, the dragon has practiced the ancient art of throwing up on his opponent to demoralize them into an early grave. Thankfully, that's about all he can do as I whack away at his claws, which I can only imagine feels similar to constantly stubbing your toe. In other words, I am sure death would be a much better alternative. Normally, we would need to go into the underground section with the bone wheel skeletons to pull some levers in order to open the door that leads to our way out and the next optional boss. However, if I just mosey my way on over to the back end carcass of the dragon we just killed and perform a jumping heavy attack, it will miraculously spring to life, allowing us to pass through its legs and onto the fog gate. I assume this is a glitch, I've been doing it since my second playthrough, but it was never ever patched, even on the remastered version from 2018, so I guess we can just assume it's a feature. Priscilla the crossbreed is not hostile, but I said all bosses, and I meant all bosses. Her gimmick is that she turns invisible when you start the fight, and you have to track her footprints via the snow. Unfortunately for her, I've seen The Lord of the Rings many times, so I just channel my inner Golem and find her in no time and begin to lay the smackdown. She can just count herself lucky that I didn't bite her finger off. Exiting the course, we are back at the painting and can now proceed on to Anor Londo proper. If you were expecting me to rage at the 2 Silver Knight archers, I am afraid you'll be left disappointed. This is where I use the parry for the first of the aforementioned 2 times as I sprint right up to the one on the right and just slowly etching myself towards him will cause him to eventually take out his sword, which I can then easily parry. Swinging away at him could work, but knowing my luck, the small step I take when arming the club would send me straight down to the streets below. Something I have not mentioned as of yet is that my strength is now at 40, and I am beginning to funnel the rest of my levels into endurance until it reaches the same number, and then I shall focus on health. They are the only stats that matter for this run, and seeing how strength kind of soft caps around 40, and endurance stops giving you stamina at 40, health is the only other skill that seemed worthwhile. I figured I should mention this now so you can all understand why I'm doing as much damage as I am to Ornstein and Smo. The problem with fighting multiple enemies honestly doesn't really come into play during their boss fight. Yes, they will still attack you at the same time, which can be very annoying, but unlike say 2 very quick Dark Wraiths carving me up at once, one of them is very quick, and the other big boy is incredibly slow, which will naturally allow some extra breathing room before I get comboed to death. That's not even mentioning the best part of this fight, that of course being
the pillars.
With these beauties, you can easily separate the 2, allowing you to focus on whittling down Ornstein to proceed to phase 2. I mean, yeah, you could take on Smoke first, but then you don't get his armor, and why would you ever want to do that to yourself? Super Saiyan Smoke isn't much to write home about either, other than having lightning-based attacks and a new and improved Thundercrack. It's about the same. Just roll away from the AoE and then try and cuddle in close when he swings his weapon to get in your hits. Before long, the fight is won, and we get the grand prize of the Lord Vessel, and nothing else. The Lord Vessel will let us teleport to some previously visited bonfires to cut down on backtracking, but it also opens up the way to the last 3 major bosses. For those of you wondering why I haven't went to fight Gwendolyn yet, well, I cannot open the way to his boss arena by way of destroying the Guinevere illusion, as I cannot reach her with the club, and I don't feel like using bombs or throwing knives, as to me they are weapons and are against the rules. So if I want to kill Gwendolyn, I will need to get the Darkmoon Seance Ring, which is located in the Catacombs, back beneath Firelink Shrine. We will circle back to this thought later. For now, we warp back to the bonfire near Spider-Woman and proceed down into the old lava pits, where I get my revenge by making an absolute joke of a nearby Capper Demon. The first real boss here is the Demon Fire Sage, which is yet another reskin of the Asylum Demon. With that in mind, I tried the jumping attack cheese that I accidentally did on the Stray Demon, and sure enough, it breaks him right away and completely trivializes the fight, allowing me to achieve a flawless victory. God, I really want a new Mortal Kombat game so badly. Sorry, anyway, next up is the Centipede Demon. In a pseudo-boss rush style, he is literally right next door to the Fire Sage, without anything in between. First things first, you want to lure the Centipede somewhere where you can actually fight him, seeing how the lava will kill you within seconds without the ring that he drops. The area just to the right of the fog gate is probably the best, so I just stand there with my shield up and wait for him to approach. Once he is on solid, non-flammable ground, the fight is basically won. Just stand underneath him like you would with any other big boss, swinging back and forth between his legs. Which apparently is easier said than done, because the sheer number of times my club just missed him during this encounter was borderline impressive. When the attacks do manage to find their mark, the Centipede's health bar crumbles, and I can take his special ring that allows me to Jesus walk my way across the lava in the Lost Izalith, which is probably the most inconsequential area in the entire game, with the literal worst boss. Before that though, I make sure to head down this optional path to dispose of some sunlight maggots, as they will drop the helmet of the same name, which will make my life so much easier in the catacombs in just a moment. But first, we gotta go back to the Bed of Chaos. It's a platformer boss, kinda, sorta. Okay, not really, but I wouldn't call it a puzzle boss, so I don't know. All I do know is that it's bullshit, and I can't stand it. I also may have kinda used a basic cheese strat for this fight, by which I mean I walk over and destroy one of its pods, and then immediately reload the game to respawn outside the gate, and then go back in, head over to the second pod, and rinse and repeat. Seeing how the pods don't come back after you take them out, this is the only fight where something like this works. After the pods are down, I can walk in and carefully roll onto this lower branch, and once you do, it's game over for the Bed of Chaos, as you can quickly advance to the bug inside and squish it with a single swing. Like any time I use a big cheese strat like this, I promise this will be the only time I use it in a Dark Souls run. If I do any more, I will fight it the proper way, or at least not this way. Anywho, one more Lord Soul down, 2 to go, and they will probably be just as fast. I decided to go for the Catacombs next. Nito was probably the easiest of the lords, plus I don't like to run the Seath boss arena, so the longer I can put that one off, the better. Bone men are normally weak to club-like weapons, so it should come as no surprise that I am absolutely dominating my way through the catacombs right now, and not much is able to stand in my way. All except the Soul Black Knight I forgot about, who pretty much chopped me in half like a piece of firewood. No matter, when I make it back to him, one backstab followed by a heavy is more than enough to put him out of commission. It was around here where I also stopped to do some exploring to grab that last ring I needed if I wanted to fight all the bosses. Speaking of bosses, it's time for everyone's favourite, Pinwheel, and he's already dead. Okay, moving on. The main difficulty of the catacombs is how dark it is. Get it? It's kinda like the caves in Metal Gear Solid 3 if I was to compare it to anything, and me being me, of course I'm going to use Metal Gear. The only difference is that that bug I glued to my forehead will now actually let me see, and that is nowhere near as terrifying. You all may be wondering where Patches is. Don't worry about him, he's fine, I promise. A couple of sticky encounters with the Dogman skeletons and another Black Knight as they seem to be multiplying, and I can get to Nito. Fun fact, if you two-hand your weapon and block, your character spaces their legs out just enough when they're in the standstill position that Nito's ranged attack will, for whatever reason, just whiff right in between their legs. After the hassle with the Centipede, this feels well earned. So, of course, the big gimmick with Nito is he brings in a bunch of skeletons that continue to respawn, as he is their necromancer, making this a bit of a gank fight. There are 2 ways to circumvent this. First of all, and easiest, is bring a divine weapon, as that will permanently kill the skeletons regardless of what Nito does, or in my case, just stand by the entrance and wait for Nito to approach you. If you stay around the entrance, only 2 skeletons will aggro you right away, and should be easy enough to deal with. It also helps that Nito himself is a huge pushover. His AoE attack could be deadly if you couldn't just block and tank it, plus it also temporarily knocks down his own allies, so it's sometimes more of a help than a hindrance. Anyway, after all that advice, watch me rush Nito anyway, once I realise my club would just ruin his whole day. All that leaves is Seath in the wonderfully fun Duke's archives. Yay! Well, first we have some loose ends to tie up, that being Gwendolyn, of course. With the Dark Moon ring equipped, he will open the way to his boss room, and you can fight him. I say fight, but it's more like an aggressive game of tag. It's a running simulator really, as he just keeps teleporting back through the room while bombarding you with ranged attacks, be it arrows or magic. To be fair, I am rather cautious of the magic, as my resistance to it isn't very high, and it will most definitely mess me up if it manages to land. He is fairly weak in all other regards, so after a few cycles we can finally cross him off the list after he T-poses himself out of existence. Okay, now for the archives. The little blue crystal men running around look no more intimidating than the hollows we fought in the Undead Burg, but don't let them fool you. For whatever reason, these are some of the hardest hitting enemies in the entire run. Not helping matters are the interpretive dancers in the backlines, providing them with damage buffs. The club still does its job and gets me through safely for what it's worth. I just need to be careful about not taking too many hits, lest I want to die immediately. On the topic of death, here's the only forced death in the entire game, outside of using the speedrun trick to skip it. We cannot kill Seath here as he's straight up invincible, so the only option is death. Well, joke's on him, way back in Sen's Fortress I picked up a rare ring of sacrifice just for this occasion, so he doesn't get to take my souls from me or inflict a curse should I be incredibly unlucky. We die and reawaken in the opening of an Elder Scrolls game, and now we need to deal with more snakes and these weird abomination women. They're all easy enough, and to save us all on some time, just know that there are some shenanigans involving rotating Hogwarts-like staircases along with wizards that are easily dealt with a well-placed clubbing, while I make my way for the most palm sweat-inducing area of the whole series, in my opinion. The fight with Seath is child's play, it's the run-up to it that is the annoying part. The golems outside will relentlessly chase you if you don't put them out of their misery, which certainly heightens an already stressful situation as you put your faith in your control stick not to drift while you ever so carefully inch yourself across these invisible bridges that have an unspecified width, so hope you don't slip. Why are they invisible? Fuck you, that's why. I don't even give a damn about the murder clams, just beat them up, it's not that hard. Anyway, now that I have vented about that, let's get on to the big naked dragon. We started with a small standoff as he seemed very reluctant to approach me, probably considering I'm keeping his immortality crystal and life's work hostage. Well, unfortunately for him, I don't believe in diplomacy today, so I destroy it by rolling right through it in style. While he's having a breakdown, I rush him and start laying on the damage. The thing about Seath the Scaleless is that you may be tempted to circle him, as after all, making it round to his tail and cutting it off gets you the oh so iconic Moonlight Greatsword. Problem is, doing this causes him to rampage, which can inflict a crazy amount of damage and can be rather hard to consistently avoid, especially if he is turning while doing it or if you get stuck in his other tails or tentacles. Well, we don't need the sword as it may as well be a paperweight to us, so we can just stick to his front and pummel away to our heart's content. Seath primarily only seems to cycle between two attacks, one for when you're up close and another for when you're at a distance. Knowing this, we can close the gap, get the hits in, and then run away when he does his close range move, bait out the long range, close the gap, and start beating again, and then rinse and repeat. Once more, very sound advice. I just wish I would listen to myself. He doesn't manage to kill me, but for what it's worth, he comes pretty damn close at one point. I am able to heal up afterwards though, and from there only a few more hits puts down the dragon, and now we can proceed to the final boss. Except that is not the case, as I did say every boss, and we all know by now that if you're playing Dark Souls in current year, you're more than likely doing so via the remaster, meaning the DLC is pre-baked into the game from the get-go. The DLC has 3 main bosses and 1 optional, so let's go over them now and how they went. The first boss, the Sanctuary Guardian, is able to stack on the damage very quickly, with a mix of me being bad at dodging his attacks, and me getting poisoned by one of said attacks. Like a fool, I never equipped the purple moss before the start of the fight, so I can't even quickly get rid of it, lest I want to stumble through the menus. I can't complain all that much though. Considering I'm doing the DLCs right before the final fight, I am probably a lot stronger than the game anticipated. Just see how much damage each swing of the club does to the Guardian's health bar, it's pretty good. After he whiffs one of his attacks, I manage to get in behind him and land just enough hits to quickly drain what's left of his life force and come out victorious. The wood section is fairly simple. The stone guardians and aggressive gardeners go down in no less than 3 strikes each. Like usual, my worst enemy here is Poor Judgment and Isaac Newton. Oh my god, look guys, it's Bloodborne 60 FPS! I'm not the first person to make this joke and I sure as hell will not be the last. Well, next fight is Artorias, the other most popular boss, and no, it's not because he has decided to leave anything just hanging out. No, it's really just because he's cool. He is an aggressive and fast boss, at least compared to those in the base game, so it's nice to have something a little different. Unfortunately for him, before hitting New Game Plus, he is pretty easy to deal with. Or rather, outside of this one stab move, he doesn't do a lot of damage. Much like the Four Kings, putting on a stone armor set trivializes the fight, as he will find it hard to stagger you, and before he buffs himself up, it's honestly viable to just stand there trading blows with him. Now, for as short as the fight was, it was far from perfect. He still got in a good few hits, mainly because I wasn't fast enough to knock him out of his powering up buff at the beginning of the fight. If I had managed to do so, then this fight would have been a complete joke. That blunder on my part caused me to play the fight as intended. I know, how terrible. That wasn't only until the buff wore off, and then I could safely start attacking again. When his health dropped to around a quarter, he rolled away to try and set up the buff once more, but this time I was fast enough and was able to stop it, allowing for a few more hits to win me the fight. Before the next boss, we have a short jaunt through a nearby village and have to deal with more new creatures from the DLC. This time it's these weird bloated looking people. The normal melee ones are simple enough, it's the ones that cast magic that are the real problem, as the new dark magic tears right through you in a matter of seconds. Fortunately, thanks to having the sunlight maggot or skull lantern, we can shine them on this wall here and grab the silver pendant. It is a tool that we can pop at any time to create a small barrier around our character that dispels any and all dark magic that is coming our way. As you might expect, this now nullifies the casters and makes them simple to get past. Okay, so even though this thing here is not a boss, I figured I should mention him anyway, as he is a completely unique design, doesn't respawn, and only shows up here. If you have a weapon that just bounces off him, he can be a problem. However, the club is not one of those weapons, so about 4 hits and the fight is won. Alright, now onto the big bad of the DLC, Manus, and the boss I died the most to in the entire run. First go around, and things actually start off rather well. I made sure to keep some distance between us at all times, so that I could not only roll out of the way of his normal attacks with ease, but be ready to retreat whenever he does his roar, as that means he's about to break out his infamous juggle combo, which is very likely to be a death sentence, as once you're caught in it, there is no escape. I managed to get him down to half with very little issues. Unfortunately for me, even though I had the silver pendant equipped, I was far too slow to activate it, and as expected, got one shot by one of his dark magics. My bad, attempt number 2, and it's pretty much a repeat, except I didn't even get him down to half. It was the magic that killed me once more, but this time I had plenty of time to use the pendant. However, I panic switched off of it once I saw the magic incoming, and wasn't able to get back to it in time and use it before I was killed. If I wasn't freaking out, I probably could have just rolled through most of it. More than likely still would have taken some damage, but at the very least I would have been alive. Third time's the charm, as they say, and I played just like I did in the first attempt, only this time I landed fewer hits anytime I had an opportunity to make sure I not only had the stamina to get away, but to give me more than enough time to use the pendant. Sure enough, this works. You don't have to be precise when using the pendant, by the way, you can literally just spam it as soon as you see the magic incoming, as it will deflect all of it without an issue. With his magic mostly out of the picture, all I have to worry about is his melee attacks, and I won't lie, even without my full stone set on, they're not doing a ton of damage, so I wasn't at all worried, outside of the aforementioned combo anyway. After deflecting a bunch of his magic, he was left open, and a power attack followed by a swing, otherwise known as my only true combo, is enough to finally be rid of the Father of the Abyss. That's the main DLC bosses done, only leaving one more optional boss, that being Kalameet, the Black Dragon. Well, thanks to getting the crest key earlier, I can become friends with Hawkeye Go, and after intentionally getting burnt to a crisp in Kalameet's boss arena, Go will prove that he is the absolute best bro in the world by making sure that the dragon fights you like a man in even combat. Kalameet can seem pretty intimidating the first time you fight him, what with the damage he can output at a moment's notice, but he also, unfortunately for him, falls victim to the same problem as a lot of the other huge bosses in Dark Souls. Firmly planting myself right underneath him and hacking away at his legs is a surefire way to empty his health bar before he knows what's going on. His attacks are also pretty well telegraphed for what it's worth, so you have enough time to dodge into them and get in some easy damage. Especially this one where he starts slowly breathing fire in front of him. If you can find a reliable way to bait him into doing this consistently, congratulations, the fight was won the instant you stepped in through the fog gate. With all this in mind, it's not long before the last optional boss has failed, leaving only the final boss, Gwyn, the Lord of Cinder. And this is where we will be making use of both the Hornet Ring we got from Seath and parrying for the second and final time. I feel it's not news to anyone by now that you can literally just walk into the final boss room and parry him to death with very, very little effort. The Hornet Ring just speeds up the process as it increases the damage of critical attacks like backstabs and parries. I mean, I can do it, and I suck at parrying in Dark Souls. I even suck at it here, as you can see me miss the timing completely multiple times, and yet, when I do land him, it does so much damage and knocks him down for long enough that I can get in some free heals, and then start the process over again, because much like the Stray Demon earlier, doing this seems to lock him into an infinite loop, which he won't stop doing the same 1-2 combo. It takes literally less than 2 minutes with this method to defeat the final boss. I then it's my way to the door for the Dark Lord ending, finishing the game and proving yes, you can indeed beat Dark Souls with the club. God, I love this game so much, and this was a lot of fun to record. I know it wasn't that tough in the end, as the drawbacks of the weapon, such as slow attacks and no combos, really didn't matter a whole lot once I was outputting crazy damage. But I just really wanted to make a Dark Souls video, and I figured the club would be a fun weapon to use on my very first challenge run of the game. Again, if you want to see all of the boss fights unedited in full, check out the link in the description, which will take you to a video containing all of the fights. Regardless, that's going to be in this challenge video. If you enjoyed what you saw, consider giving the video a like, and you're interested in more challenges in the future, feel free to subscribe. Try to one of these videos every week. My name is Nerbit, say everyone, I'll see y'all in the next video.